That was a news conference from Pennsylvania on the prime suspect in the murder of UnitedHealthcare CEO Brian Thompson. Here to unpack all this, Andrew Stoltmann, criminal defense attorney, and James Fitzgerald, retired FBI supervisory special agent and co-host of the Color Red podcast. Mr. Stoltmann, let's start with you. Your reaction to what you heard tonight.
Well, I think there's going to be a tsunami of evidence against him. And you take a look at some of the stuff they already have, and they've just started their investigation. They have the DNA evidence. They have the manifesto from his backpack. Most importantly, they now have what they believe is the murder weapon, the ghost gun, and the silencer. I guarantee you right now the FBI is testing that gun to see if it matches those shell casings that were used in the killing. So I think this defendant is in a lot of trouble. I think they're going to secure a search warrant for his phone, for his computer, for his apartment, everything else. I think he's in a lot of trouble.
Mr. Fitzgerald, here's what we have about Mr. Mangione. He graduated at the top of his class. A stellar student from an elite private high school in Baltimore. He went on to study engineering, got his advanced degree, master's degree in computer science. The Angle spoke to a number of Mangione's former college classmates who were all shocked to hear about his arrest. They told us he was smart and, quote, chill. One said, "I knew him as a very polite, driven engineering student who usually carried a smile. He had a really nice, genuine group of friends who were pretty studious and a little removed from the bar and party scene. Externally, he seemed like someone who was more likely to start a nonprofit than read manifestos." And then another one told us, "I wanted to set him up with one of my friends because he would be a great boyfriend." James, this is wild. He also worked at Stanford University in 2019 for about 6 months at a summer program for incoming college students, high school seniors, where apparently he was very well liked there as well. Your take tonight?
Yeah, there's some semblance of this guy to Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, of course, with the manifesto, brilliant, moving ahead, top of his class. But this particular person is much more outgoing and socially oriented than Kaczynski ever was. And there's indicators that there's some kind of a back surgery he may have had, and this is what tilted him towards anger at the medical insurance companies. Interestingly, back in the 60s, Kaczynski was turned down for a sex change operation. That's when he decided to kill people. So, and it seems like this guy is an advocate, or an acolyte, I should say, of Ted Kaczynski, having read his manifesto, quoted from it. So once again, we're getting, even long after, or a couple years after he's dead, long after his offenses, we're getting some of these people that see Kaczynski as a hero when he wasn't, and neither's a shooter
Andrew,
of the CEO in New York.
Yeah, Andrew, on this point, I mean, again, extremely bright, extremely studious, well-liked. He also, according to one report, I think the New York Post has this, had harbored, of recent age, anti-capitalist views, anti-medical industry views. What of that?
I think it's motive, and I think they are really going to dig into that. I think there was a review that Fox News reported on earlier today about he gave a review on a Ted Kaczynski book and basically adhering to some of those principles. So a good prosecutor is going to take that, he's going to mold it, and that's going to be the motive for doing this crime. Every jury wants to see a motive. That's the sort of thing that, a juror can look at and say, wait a minute, this is why this smart, bright, by all accounts, genius guy would do a first-degree murder like this. And he will be charged with first-degree murder, and I think he is in a lot of trouble. And
James, on this note of his being able to evade police for the days that he did, I mean, what do you think about that, given the fact that he committed this murder, allegedly? Then he got away on the bike. He went through the park. He got out of New York. He got in a cab. He got in a but he was able to get into the park and kind of disappear for a while. Is that surprising to you, given the surveillance that we have in New York?
It is surprising, but he could have easily changed his identity, a different color mask, different sweatshirt, hoodie, whatever. But this goes back to what we as profilers and behavioral analysts look at, and that is pre-offense behavior, post-offense behavior. I think he was well planned for the days, maybe even a week or more before this homicide. And of course, we saw the homicide on video. We know how that went down. But I think his plan broke apart in his post-offense days and 5 days afterwards. If he just holed up in some safe house, Airbnb, hotel room, he could have been, out of sight, out of mind for much longer than he was. But here he is traipsing across Pennsylvania on I-80 on the Pennsylvania Turnpike. Who knows? And he winds up coincidentally not too far from where the Idaho University quadruple killer lived. As the crow flies, less than 50 miles, I believe. Coincidence, of course, but just ironic that part of eastern Pennsylvania, both of these areas come into play here.
Well, Andrew, his last known address was in Honolulu. He was born in Towson, Maryland, went to school in Baltimore, UPenn's Ivy League institution. He ends up at Stanford for a while. And at some point, there seems to have been a turn in him. Given at least what we've uncovered so far, do you believe when all is said and done, and who knows when we'll find out, that we will find there is a personal event, medical event, that may have, set this otherwise, it looks like, fairly brilliant mind off?
Laura, that's a great question, and I can guarantee you right now, the investigators are talking to the family, they're talking to his friends, they're trying to see what triggered him to do what he did, to veer off of this path. And everybody says he's such a bright guy, and clearly he is, but as a killer, maybe he isn't quite as bright as what he thinks he is. Taking off that mask at the Starbucks counter to flirt with a girl was not a good idea. Not throwing away that gun, which will likely be the #1 piece of evidence in this case, at least behind maybe DNA, not a bright decision. So yes, this kid is really smart, but he really made some mistakes, and prosecutors are looking to see what is that triggering event that took him from a good life to first-degree murder.
James, and yet authorities are saying the investigation is continuing, not just into his personal background, but anyone else in a network that he may be engaging with on a regular basis. We haven't really talked much about that. But these kind of anti-capitalist groups, if he was in one of them online, how important will that be in flushing this out?
Oh, very important. I mean, his social media footprints, and as far back as they can track it, will produce a lot of evidence. Hopefully it can be used in court to further strengthen the case there. But there's no doubt that there are some people who had to be aware of who this person was. That one picture was so clear, nice white straight teeth, the bushy eyebrows. I can't believe some high school kid or some fellow college student didn't recognize him. And I'm wondering if there's some people that felt this was some sort of a righteous shooting because he's, taken out this bad CEO of an insurance company, and somehow they didn't call for that reason. But I hope his family is interviewed and close friends to him, and they can tell us what they saw and knew about this.
Yeah, now, we're not going to get into this tonight, but we'll dig into it later. The Instagram posts from nutbag people, which I was sent in the commercial break earlier, crazy. Like, he's cute, and people celebrating this. This is a sickness. Honestly, it's so disappointing, but I guess we shouldn't be surprised. Gentlemen, thank you so much.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.